Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I am going to be talking about the transit Mercury in Pisces. Well, first thing I'll look at, when Mercury transits Pisces, of course, it's making that transition from Mercury in Aquarius into Pisces, and Mercury was in Aquarius. The thinking may have been a lot more objective, collectively among others. And then when you have Mercury transiting Pisces, it's really just the opposite. People are a lot more subjective in their thinking. They may be more impacted by extraneous surroundings. They might be more sensitive just to little things such as noise, and really there's just more of a general sensitivity, I think, to what's going on around them as far as how it could impact thinking. And people at this time may have a little bit more difficulty at times articulating what they want to say on average, as opposed to, say, Mercury transiting Gemini or Mercury transiting Virgo, because a lot of times it could be about emotion clouding thinking. I think what happens a lot during this time, people may make more of their mental decisions more on their intuition, perhaps just by trying to maybe kind of roll the dice, so to speak, just on a hunch, rather than maybe sitting back and analyzing things maybe more logically. Now, this could be a time too where this could be Mercury transiting Pisces could be beneficial, perhaps for somebody that does poetry, because this is associated with poetry, somebody that writes, say, fantasy or fiction novels. This is a time too where people may want to kind of, I guess you're extricating yourself from reality, so to speak, and you might be more about fantasizing things a little bit more than actually you acting on what you're thinking. And when the Mercury hits transits Aries, I think what happens is people may act upon what they're dreaming about more, and not instead of just fantasizing about things, they may actually act on it a little bit more, because Aries, of course, is very action oriented. And anyway, far as Mercury transiting Pisces, people may be a little bit more confused during this time than usual. Things may seem a little bit more nebulous, and people may be a little bit more ambivalent and indecisive than usual. You might have a little harder time making up your mind during this time than usual. Pisces has a tendency to waver back and forth on things, and when Mercury is transiting Pisces, of course, this is what could very well happen with a number of people. And the thing too is that when Mercury transits Pisces, keep in mind too that there's a little more deception in the air as far as communication goes. And it may be a little bit harder for others to detect fact from fallacy when people are speaking, because people are a little bit, let's say, maybe a little bit more gullible during this time. They're more apt to believe what others are saying. And you have the con artists, unfortunately, could be coming really strong during this time, because con artists are good at fabricating things and prevarication, and during this time people may be more apt to believe things like that. And even things, say, like a fishing expedition, say on your computer, somebody trying to get personal information from you, you may be more vulnerable and susceptible to those acts during this time than usual. So it is something to be cognizant and be wary of. And what's interesting too is that you look at this transit, I think people are a little bit more idealistic during this time, perhaps even bordering on unrealistic. People's thinking may be such where they may be looking at things where they're overlooking the transgressions of others, trying to look at things from as far as others, looking more at their good attributes, maybe sometimes to the expense of overlooking the negative, when you really need to see everything during this time and during any transit, of course. Now, people may be more inclined to communicate about what they fantasize about, what they dream about even during this time as opposed to usual. I think what's interesting too about this transit, now in many places people will get there are some allergies, some allergy attacks during the springtime is when I think a lot of times the allergies can become prominent. And what happens is Mercury, when Mercury transits Pisces, sometimes it'll transit it during the springtime for part of the spring period, but a lot of times it will transit it shortly before spring. And this for next year, for 2017, Mercury will transit Pisces from February 25th, 2017 until March 13th, 2017. So it's a little bit before spring, but sometimes you'll get some allergy attacks before then. And keep in mind, Pisces and Neptune, this is about Neptune rules Pisces, and that is associated with chemicals and allergies. And you may be, during this time, there might be some more communication and complaints about having some kind of allergy attacks during that period. So that is something to look at. I think another thing what's interesting too is that Pisces is also a sign not just about deception, but it could, I believe, be about self-deception, delusion. And you look at this, I think what's interesting, you look at in the United States, a professional basketball association, otherwise known as the NBA, the National Basketball Association, when people during this time when people are playing games at this time in the league, it's you're at a point where you have a lot of times during this time of the season when it's shortly before perhaps the end of the NBA regular season, you could have some dominant teams playing some inferior teams. And I think sometimes you have the complacency set in people. A lot of times athletes, I think, can maybe delude themselves into thinking, well, I don't have to play that hard. We can win this in a cakewalk. And I think the thinking becomes more relaxed. And I think during this time, you may be more apt to see some upsets during this time by the inferior teams conquering the more dominant teams for that reason. So I just thought that was interesting to throw into the segment. Well, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for the transit Mercury in Pisces. And stay tuned next time where I'll be talking about the transit of Venus in Aries. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone. Because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.